With us now is Joel Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and author of the Briefing book on Substack. And Joel, it's always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
Thanks, Jose. Love being with you.
So let's talk about this, because there are stumbling blocks to any kind of peace treaty.
Yes.
In this case, there have been a lot of stumbling blocks. How do you see where things stand right now?
Well, right now, it looks like Donald Trump is desperate for a deal. He is making preemptive concessions to Vladimir Putin, sending Steve Witkoff to Moscow for 3 hours. I wonder what kind of notes Witkoff took from Vladimir Putin to then transmit to Volodymyr Zelensky that he needs to follow. This is very concerning. That said, it is crucial that the fighting stop, and our European allies are also very much engaged in this. So the key now is, can they leverage this moment to actually get Vladimir Putin to stop engaging the aggressive activity that he has been engaging in, like just this week, where he bombed Kyiv, killing a dozen civilians for no cause at all. That has to be done, and that's where rebalancing of the diplomacy must take place. I'm concerned that they're not there yet, but certainly the president being desperate for a deal, he should understand part of that means getting tougher on Putin.
The difficulty, I'm sure, Joel, is when you look at something, you have to look a little bit wider, open the frame. And so what we've been seeing in Ukraine vis-a-vis the Russians, forget the Soviet Union issue, forget Holodomor and 1932 to 1933. We're talking about 2014, when they went in and took Crimea. Now, that has essentially been a fait accompli. Everybody's against it. The world expressed outrage at it, and there were sanctions, but they're still there. So how do you, with the reality, not with what you wish you had, what you have, how do you deal with something without going into some immediate concessions on both sides?
Well, when you look at the dynamics on the ground and the 10-year war that's ongoing, President Trump, what he's trying to do is to cauterize it right now and to get a ceasefire. But if he doesn't lay the groundwork in a ceasefire for a full, comprehensive peace between Russia and Ukraine, negotiated on a bilateral basis, then we're going to be back to where we have been over the past decade. We're only going to see a brief pause. This means bringing in our allies. This means bringing in the multilateral institutions. This means bringing in Europe and the European Union to be with us at the table. My concern is that the president, he's taking this all on his own. He's biased towards Russia and basically playing a weak hand. And in Moscow, they're mocking us. They're looking at us and saying, what more can they get out of the United States to get a better deal for them, for this pause, to then potentially go back to more war? That cannot be the dynamic if we want to truly end this conflict.
The president has been pushing Ukraine to accept territorial concessions, the key one in 2014. But President Zelensky has said he won't do that. He can't do that. Here's what the mayor of Kyiv, a rival of Zelensky's, had to say about the issue during an interview with the BBC.
One of the scenario, what you say is to give up the territory. It's not fair, but for the peace, temporary peace, maybe it can be solution. Temporary.
Are there temporary peace solutions?
Maybe he's poking around to try to see if Donald Trump will endorse him to become the new president of Ukraine. There are no real temporary solutions. Look, the Ukrainian people don't want to give up Crimea. There can be potentially diplomatic workarounds, but it needs to be negotiated between Ukraine and Russia directly. We cannot be telling Ukraine and forcing Ukraine on behalf of Russia to accept that Russia controls Crimea and then recognizing that. That's not going to stand the test of time. The Europeans will be very nervous. That means that we're legitimating military conquest for territorial gain, and that's just a non-starter.
Just wondering, what were the roles and the forces at play when Ukraine was asked to accept the Budapest Agreement? And what are the things that, who were the main players? It wasn't the Ukrainians and it wasn't the Russians. It was the United States and France and the UK, and a lot of promises were made. And so there are many times things that seem permanent but that end up being temporary. Is there any, Joel, you think, hope of a real peace in Ukraine?
Ultimately, only if the two parties themselves get to the table directly and negotiate an agreement. And I think we're a far way away from that. And that's the concern, that right now we're setting it up to not get to that table negotiation between the two.
Joel Rubin, it's always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Thank you very much for your time. Up next, let's take a